repeat that activity. Dopamine is values neutral. It doesn't tell you if it's a good or bad activity you're involved in. It just simply rewards you. Two others that I want to tell you about are oxytocin and vasopressin. Sexual intercourse releases a large amount of both of those hormones. There are more receptors in the female brain for oxytocin and more receptors in the male brain for vasopressin, but they both do the same thing, which is bond you to the person that you're touching and rubbing. Both hormones will also bond you to the children that are reproduced as a result of that sexual act. It gives you an involuntary chemical commitment, and even with a 20-second hug, there's an increased level of trust that is released as a result of the brain activity. Pheromones is another hormone that affects the brain. It is a chemical that is secreted through the skin of the sweat glands of most animals. The woman has receptors in her nose that are sensitive to it. So when she sees a guy and she says he looks good and he smells good, she may be being influenced by the pheromones. These chemicals will influence a woman's attraction to a man and can make her be involuntarily committed to him. Estrogen, believe it or not, is the female hormone, and it also affects the brain. It drives a female's craving for sexual intimacy, which fluctuates during her cycle, unless, of course, she's on birth control pills. It is highest during the time of ovulation, which is associated with lust and a desire for sex. Estrogen stimulates the oxytocin and helps produce an intense bonding during sexual activity. And many women appear more attractive to men during the time that their estrogen levels are higher. Lust, infatuation, and love are affected by the release of these hormones, and actually there are brain slides that show from the PET scans and the MRIs different areas of the brain that are lighted up and are active during the time of lust, that are different from mature love, and that is different from infatuation. I sometimes wish we had a portable MRI that we could put on a person as they approach you and determine, is their approach out of genuine concern for you, or is it just out of physical satisfaction? In other words, is it lust or is it love? There is a separate area of the brain that is also lighting up for pain. Believe it or not, the same area of the brain that lights up for a broken bone lights up for a broken heart. Remember, I just said there's a separate area for lust, infatuation, and mature love. However, there is the same area that lights up for pain. In other words, the brain cannot tell the difference between a broken heart and a broken bone. All it knows is it hurts. That's because the bonding has occurred with the oxytocin and the vasopressin, even in a one-night stand, so that when that bond is broken between those two individuals, the brain registers that effect. So it is undeniable that the hormones and our activity molds the brain. So when we initiate an action or thought, we repeat that action or thought. The experience of that action or thought physically molds the brain to habitually repeat that action or thought. And so bonding is an emotional, but it is also a physical act, and it is represented in the brain. What about bonding and the sexually active adolescent? Well, bonding occurs with any sexual involvement as far as science can tell. And so it does not distinguish between the age of the individual. It actually bonds regardless. And when a bond is broken and re-establish a relationship with another partner, the brain actually begins to develop a track with the bonding and breakup and the bonding and breakup, and a pattern can be established in many young people's experience that when they are ready to attach and bond with someone, the brain has gotten into the habit of bonding and breaking, and it is very challenging to be able to bond and stay bonded. As a consequence, many adolescents, young people, will actually experience the emotional pain that I mentioned earlier. But not only that, according to national surveys, many of them will be depressed, clinically depressed. 3 times more likely to be depressed than the sexually abstinent person. 3 times more likely to attempt suicide as a result of the pain, of emotional pain. Bonding may explain, or broken bonding may explain the adolescent emotional response. Good news, however, is that 2/3 of students who have had sex wish they had waited. 2/3 of them have been sexually active and now have made a decision to return to abstinence. Again, this is a great opportunity for you as a coach to encourage them in this decision and to put in place behaviors that they can do to succeed at the new decision. Remember, any action begins with a thought, and you can change the thought and therefore change the activity. So let's talk about a desired activity. That would be abstinence. So, just as we define sex, let us now define abstinence. Abstinence is the calculated decision and deliberate action to refrain from sexual activity. And it is the only true and practical way to avoid or prevent the sexually transmitted infections and the out-of-wedlock pregnancies, and it will increase the opportunity to develop healthy long-term relationships. And that's a good, healthy goal. Sometimes there may be progression from the decision to abstain to the actual ability to carry it out. Therefore, we encourage reduction of partners. I had a young woman in my office who, age 14, had already had 14 different partners. So to expect her to immediately abstain was unrealistic. Therefore, to get her to reduce her partners was a goal that we both were able to agree upon, and she has now succeeded to become sexually abstinent again. Studies have shown that by delaying intercourse with multiple partners, you have reduced your risk for sexually transmitted diseases because of your reduced exposure. You've also reduced your risk of partnering. And the younger you are when you start having sex, the more partners you may have in a lifetime. Therefore, if you reduce your partners, you will reduce your risk. Sexual risk avoidance education has the most effectiveness as far as teaching the right kind of relationship that is healthy and good, mutually monogamous, and in most places that is called marriage. It also gives you medically accurate, age-appropriate information and encourages self-control and discipline as a means for success in all areas of your life, not just sexual activity. Sexual health comes from a positive self-image. Sexual health comes from a positive self-image. Teaching character development, self-control, personal responsibility, respect for yourself and others also helps you get to the effect that you desire. Now I would like to share some real life experiences that will illustrate some of the unintended consequences of sexual activity. I'll tell you about the young woman I had in my office, 20 years old, who was a senior in college. In taking her sexual history, I asked, how many partners have you had in the last year, recognizing that this is a risk for sexually transmitted infections and the need to screen or test for STIs. She paused as she contemplated the question, and she finally asked, do you want me to include the one-nighters? She had no idea how many different partners she had had in the past year, except for those in which she was in relationship. Another young lady was a 20-year-old who now has 3 children, is cohabitating, and wanted me to help her enjoy sex again. Because of the multiple bonding and breaking, she no longer enjoyed sexual activity. So we spent a considerable amount of time talking about what was her desired goals. She had the unintended consequence of having broken so many bonds that she no longer was able to feel in a relationship anymore. A third one, real life experience I'd like to share is a 30-year-old woman who had become sexually active in college, had become infected with a chlamydia infection, totally unaware of it, subsequently married, was trying to achieve pregnancy only to learn that she was infertile from the chlamydia infection that she had acquired in college. During the time that she was in college, she also had had an abortion. So now she had to wrestle with the fact that the only child she perhaps will ever have that she had aborted at a young age. I can tell you I did not have enough tissue in my office to absorb the tears of her realization. And finally, I would like to tell you about the 30-year-old student who had had 8 abortions when she was in college, as she said, when she was not ready to have pregnancy. And now she is afraid that she will not be able to. Again, you have the physical effect of the unintended consequence, you have the emotional effect, and you have the changes that occur inside the brain. How many times have you, as a counselor, had young women in your office and you tell them this information and they go, but nobody told me, nobody warned me? Hopefully you will be encouraged to tell them. Hopefully you will have the information now that you can share with them and help them move to a place where they can make different decisions. Human beings are not robots. We're more than the sum total of our physical. We are emotional and spiritual beings. Sexual activity is a wholesome, healthy behavior that involves all of who we are: body, mind, spirit, and emotions. To avoid the unintended consequences of sexual activity, the STIs, the unintended pregnancy, and the emotional pain, we must make deliberate, healthy decisions. we must focus on developing healthy relationships. The ability for us to do this can be with making a definite decision and putting in the necessary actions to achieve that. We would be remiss if we ignored the science and just went with our feelings and our emotions. So it's important to understand the unintended consequences of sexual activity can be changed to develop healthy relationships, and you as a coach can help each of your clients achieve that goal.